What is going on, everybody? I'm Rob Westerman of GVP Daily. Joining me today, as he always does, on another great edition of the Great Wall is not a Great Wall of Knowledge,
Yes.
is the man behind the name of the show, Mike Wall. Mike, how we doing? You still feeling that sting from last weekend like I am?
Yeah, that was tough, man. That's we haven't talked in a week.
Yeah.
We haven't talked since that game. That was a tough game. That was that was all kinds of disaster, right? That's a very revealing. You can take a lot out of a game and you can extrapolate a lot. I'm sure, like, social media and all it's been beaten to death, but
Yes.
you can take a lot from the series of events that led up to that game and start looking at things in retrospect, and you go, man, like, you should have seen it coming.
I know. And I just saw the replay last night of the 4th-and-1 stop that we got. There was like 4 minutes left, and I'm like, we were up 10-3, and I'm like, man, how did we lose this game? Not only lose it, but lose it in regulation. Like,
Yeah.
I get turning the ball, or I get punting it, they score a touchdown to tie it, and then we go to overtime, but it's like, man, we lost this game in regulation after being up 10-3, getting the ball back after a huge momentum swing play. Yeah, I'm with you. Tough pill to swallow this year. Although it was a similar type of loss as the heartbreakers of the years past, it was a little different. Some of that being the uncertainty of who will and won't be back next year, but mainly I thought this team more than any over the last decade was the most balanced, maybe talented, top to bottom. Rodgers MVP, defense playing a little better than years past. It was hyped up this postseason run with everybody coming back. Question is, compared to the last decade or so of Packers teams, where do you rank this team as far as the most talented since we were last champs in Super Bowl 45?
Yeah, I think that's the tough part. Is this is arguably the best team they've had, so defensively, they're on the right track now, and they have a front four that can stop the run, they can get after the passer. They have a great middle linebacker. Hopefully, he comes back in Vonner Campbell. And for my money, I really like Barnes. I like Barnes as well. So I think they have good players. Their secondary is young. They're going to get better. I didn't see a hole on the offense until they lined up against the 49ers and they put Billy Turner at left tackle instead of right and let Dennis Kelly, who's like 6'7" or 6'8", go against like 6'2" Popeye arms Nick Bosa, who's going to leverage him all day and create problems that were completely unnecessary. As well as like Adam Stedovich and the offensive staff have done this year. Like, that was a real head scratcher for me. I thought, to be honest with you, I could make the argument that was the entire difference in the offense. And I know this has probably been brought up before now because we've brought it up a couple times in some other shows. But you think about Bakhtiari missing the last 2 games in the playoffs. That knee injury on that Saturday before practice, whatever.
Yep.
Has cost these guys 2 playoff games just because of the decisions that they made afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
And then you look at, like, I said this before, listen, we're all Packers fans, and the NFL is really, really hard. And these guys have done a good job, and they work their tails off to get where they are. When you have a season like you are, and you're ranked number 1 in the NFC, and you have the MVP, you have a guy like Aaron Rodgers, like, he really does gloss over a lot of problems.
Yeah.
Like, he masked a lot of problems. He masked a lot of problems when Mike McCarthy was there, and he masked a lot of problems when Matt LaFleur was there. And I know Matt was up for head coach of the year this year. And you start thinking, especially after the game, gosh, we're the number 1 team in the NFC, and we have the worst special teams in the league. Like, we have the worst, literally the worst. By some measurement, you have the worst special teams in the league.
Yep.
And it points to me of there's a great saying of how you do anything is how you do everything.
Yeah.
And when you have a guy that is capable of being the National Football League most valuable player multiple times in a row, he arguably could have won it more than he has already.
Yeah.
Generational talent. What happens sometimes is there's a complacency or a comfort level that is placed around the organization because they're winning games. And sometimes a lot of the stuff is kind of swept under the carpet. Yeah. And when you are the absolute worst at something in the National Football League, it is going to cost you eventually. Like, someone is going to figure it out, and you are going to lose a game because of it. And I know that has come up multiple times this year with regards to the special teams. Everyone's worried about it. I think everyone was just worried. Everyone was just hoping to have a draw there. But the truth is, if you don't address that problem during the course of the year, whether that means people get fired, whether that means your starters are playing on special teams, which when I was playing, that's just how it was. When you got to the playoffs, your best people were going to be on the field because you didn't want to lose that game. It wasn't about like saving them for the next game. There is no other game.
Yeah, that's the last game.
So the perspective and the attention to detail that is lacking right now kind of speaks volumes to me about what else, like if Aaron Rodgers leaves, what other problems are we going to find out about, right? Because everyone says this is a great roster without Aaron. I'm not saying that. I'm saying it's a good roster. It's an average roster. Aaron Rodgers is an 8-game swing kind of guy. He has that kind of talent,
Yep.
So that part of it's really disappointing. Just the fact that wasn't addressed and then ends up you lose the game essentially because of that. It's tough.
It just hurts because like your first thing with Kelly and then Turner going over to left tackle. I was talking with my buddy Jonathan before the game, and I was like, no, it's going to be Yash. Like he was thinking, what if they, because you'd see on Twitter like multiple options. What if they swing Billy over to left and then keep Kelly right? I'm like, no, that just wasn't even really an actual thought for me. I was just, no, they're going to keep Yash over there. He played against them the first time. He did fine, and he's played a ton of games over there, and everybody loves him in the building, it seems like. And then they went with Turner, and I was like, well, then the news came out. Bakhtiari was out, and I was like, okay, like he played 2 weeks ago, but all right, whatever. And then they come out with people are tweeting during warmups like so and so is in the first group. I'm like, that just doesn't make any sense. Like he hasn't played there all year long, and it's the game. Like you said, there's no next game. It's the game. And then your second thing, heard you talking. I listen to Andy Herman every day. His show. Was listening to you guys yesterday. Like Dean Lowry, Lancaster, they work so hard on the defensive side. Herman was talking about, and then they're blocking the field goal, and it's like they don't really care. So going to your point, as far as like whatever you do, your best. You care. What was your quote?
For things that you love in your life, how you do anything is how you do everything.
Yeah.
Right. Like I don't necessarily care about making my bed, but like we were talking about lifting before. The focus and effort, the attention to detail you bring to your profession has to be across the spectrum because, it's from a coaching perspective or from an organizational perspective. When you allow athletes by your actions to now feel a certain way about different aspects of their job. So Dean Lowry and Lancaster as an example, and listen, those guys, who knows what happened there? I think everybody who has ever watched football knows that the inside gap's the one you got to worry about if you're Lancaster, right? Not the outside gap as much. But there's just too many of those happening on special teams. And when you allow an athlete, like athletes want to jump over, we're genetically predetermined that we're going to try to jump over whatever hurdle you set. But if you put that hurdle on the floor, we're just going to trip over it. You put it up really tall up here, I'm going to try to jump over it every single time. And you're going to get the best out of me.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So when you allow through your actions, and whether that's just the lack of time they spend on special teams, the lack of detail, it's like when you, how sometimes you go to a meeting in the beginning of the year for a corporation, or this happens in the football building all the time. And they'll say, we need to address this what we're acting as insignificant thing, but it's like a culture thing. Here's our culture.
Yeah.
Here's our mission statement, right? They say it once and then you never see it again. This is what happens when you allow that, because when people are allowed to think that it's not as important and they start failing, they're failing themselves, but now they fail the entire organization. And really, from a structural standpoint, like you have to give every single part of your preparation the same amount of consideration, whether it's 15 plays, 17 plays in the game, 70 plays in the game, whether it's how you approach the weight room after you practice, whether it's how you approach your meeting room, your decorum, what you bring for as far as your preparation, your focus and effort in meetings, everything's got to be at this like championship level or something's going to fail you. And I think that's a little bit what you saw in this game.
Yeah. And that's the thing is all year long is we're hoping, well, it's going to cost us a game and hopefully it costs us a game before the playoffs so that it literally, because it seemed like no changes were being made. So like we're hoping, hopefully it'll cost us a game in the regular season, and then they'll be like, all right, this is something that can actually cost us a game. And then we saw last weekend, everything happening from, kickoff coverage to the black punt, the block field goal, everything. Let's start with the field goal. You played the game. Like you said earlier, inside gaps most important. What happened there? What did you see from a game copy? I'm not sure if you watched anything else afterwards. What happened there?
Well, I mean, very simply, the Niners, saw that they could rush that outside gap hard, and when you put that, basically what happens there is the tight end that's on the line of scrimmage, it has to set his foot back, and you kind of have to create half arm, half body to close that gap in between you and the guy that's that wing back that was Lancaster. Yep. And then Lancaster has to step in. You're creating this body presence. So your inside arm body presence, and then your outside hand trying to push that guy. If you get your hand on the shoulder of the outside rusher, he should never be able to make it, given the amount of time it takes to actually snap and kick the ball.
Yep.
And they just had a breakdown. And the thing that's crazy is you put a guy or guys that are defensive linemen there, because essentially all I have to do is this. Like, I don't even have to hit you.
Yeah.
To 300 pounds, my arm's big enough that I'm like the turnstile in the subway station. Like, it takes a little bit of effort to push me through, right? And so now you get two of those plus half a hip. There's no way they should be able to get through. It's just one of those things that it's inexplicable for it to happen in that situation. And again, this is why, probably because of everything that's happening, the circumstances around the coaching staff leaving and Aaron's uncertainty, it's such a bummer, man.
Yeah,
such a bummer.
It just stinks. Like, there's nothing, there's not, they were the better team, they beat us, or, it just sucks. Something that was a huge concern in the middle of the season was the field goal unit as a whole, whether it was blocking up front for Mason or executing kicks, was a part of costing the season, with 3 points off the board, huge momentum swing right before half. We get the turnover, big play to Aaron Jones to set us up instead of grabbing some points. Aaron Jones, the big catch down the sideline, that was kind of another thing. He didn't go out of bounds. Everything is happening so quickly, and it's a huge play that maybe it wasn't really expected. Obviously, it was a breakdown in coverage on their end. Did you think he could one score, or did you think he spun around, made the catch, slowed him up a little bit? I felt like he couldn't really score, maybe go out of bounds. I don't know. What do you make of that play?
Here's the thing. I was a 6'5", 295-pound left guard. I'm never going to question any athletic move made by a guy like Aaron Jones. I stay in my lane with that stuff, man. Those guys are special, unique athletes. If he didn't think he could make it, then he couldn't make it, because
I didn't think
if he doesn't think up here that he's going to make that run, then he's obviously got back against that guy for a reason.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. Let's talk about kickoff coverage unit. Multiple times, I think almost every time they were able to get the ball out, to the 30, 40-yard line. Each time we kicked it. Thankfully, our defense played outstanding, so it wasn't like crazy detrimental. So it wasn't like a focus point, really. You can't have the starting field position for the opposition be a first down away from the field goal. Is it just simple execution from our players, lack of coaching, lack of emphasis on the special teams overall? That, like, what's the deal with kickoff coverage? Because we never get a kickoff return past the 20, and it gets to the 30, and we're like, hell yeah, that's awesome. But, like, they're coming out to the 40, the 50, and it's on plays where they're, like, bottled up over here, and then they're running away across field, and they're getting up the sideline somehow. I just don't understand it.
Well, there's a couple guys in the league right now that are getting hired as special teams coordinators for a reason. Guys that keep the same names keep popping up. There's always a different level amongst different staffs, different coaches, a different level of preparedness that they're willing to put into special teams. I was lucky to work with two guys with Miami Dolphins, Marlon Marouf and Rizzi, Darren Rizzi, that's now the D coordinator for the Saints. Those guys, like, their attention to detail was absolutely off the charts. Right. And so they just always had really, really good sound units. They did game management. Like, they're just really, really sharp guys. It's not necessarily like that in every building. But again, guys, it's the hard thing I think for fans is like, okay, who, it's just like, who do we blame? Right.
Yeah. You can't find anybody.
Yeah. It's really, this sounds like the buck stops with two people, right? At the end of the day for this loss, you start going, okay, well, who's the head coach? Right. despite like the way that we hire the general manager and the head coach, like I'm not sure what the hiring practices, but like the head coach sets the culture for the building. He's setting the schedule. He's the one who interacts with the players. Like the buck stops with him with all his coaching, the responsibility, anything that happens on the field. And then the other thing is Aaron Rodgers dropped 10 points against Jimmy Garoppolo. So, I mean, we'd say it's the Niners defense, but like when we're looking at matchups and who's got to win that day, it's like we dropped 10. So you drop 10 at home versus the Niners in the playoff game, you should probably lose the game.
It's just, our offense scores more points than their offense, and we lose. It just, I mean, even that first drive, we scored more points than their offense. And it's just is one of these games where, like, things that don't ever happen. Like game doesn't fall on Mercedes' fumble at all. But, like, he hasn't fumbled or lost one since 2013.
And the momentum swing in that momentum swing was palpable, right? You
just
could feel it.
Massive. Yeah, you go down, score easily, first drive, 7-0. I'm like, all right, this is a perfect start. But I've seen this before. Perfect start. Get the ball back. I'm like, oh shoot, we're gonna go down and score again and go up 14-0. And it's not all but over, but at that point you gotta be feeling pretty good at 14-0 on that midfield. It happens. I'm like, oh man, it's gonna be one of these games, huh? One of these games. Yeah, I'm with you. It's tough as far as the kickoff coverage. Beginning of games, after scores, or after the half. All moments that are like tone setters and giving up a huge play either at the beginning of the game or at the end of the half gives them a little extra juice for the offense. And then even worse, after a score, we gain a little momentum. We screw up and give them a nice return, good field position after. It's something that's been happening for a while now. What's that like? You played. Offense goes down and scores. And have you ever been a part of you go down and score and then you kick off and they return a touchdown or they return it pretty deep? What's that like? Is it just defeat? Is it like deflating or what?
Well, I mean, honestly, look at these situations. If you're a winner, man, it's just back to work. And I know that's the easy answer. But if you're a winner and you want to win that game, it's just back to work. You just deal with situations. Look, I'm a big, and I didn't put this into words when I was playing, but the way I always think about stuff is kind of like Stoic philosophy, man. If I can't control it, I'm not going to put energy into it. It's not worthwhile, right? Because there's too much. The situation that you're in is too important, right? To expend energy on anything else. You wasted energy as negative emotion. So when something like that happens, like the responsibility for the Green Bay Packers with the offense that they have, regardless of what happens on defense, what happens. Look, I can promise you right now, the Green Bay Packers offense did not think that the Green Bay Packers defense was going to hold the San Francisco 49ers to 0 touchdowns, right? Like they played out of their mind. They should be commended for how well they did. If you're an offensive player and you're just, there's all this is swirling around the special teams and it should be. But if you're an offensive player on that team to score 10 points against the San Francisco 49ers in the playoff game that you got a bye week to prepare for.
At home,
and listen, and got severely outplayed. You talk about guys who just got severely – the tight end room got severely outplayed by Fred Warner and company. I mean, it was
sucks because those guys
– yeah.
Those guys are always – I talked to Dominic Daphne earlier this season. He always felt like that room, Mercedes was the guy. He's always preaching the little things and everything. And that room always felt like it was the most prepared. And you hear Justin Houghton talking during the season. I think he only talked a couple times, but he's like, we always feel like we're the, everything rides and dies with us, blocking, passing game, everything sets up. So I had full confidence, and I always have, because it's been a quiet group because they don't really do much wrong. And then, like you said, with Fred Warner, I mean, Fred Warner, probably one of the best linebackers in the game.
Yeah, they played well. Their backers played well. Even on the touchdown drive, Fred Warner was everywhere. And then, of course, he punched the ball with Mercedes. But in their run game, they got beat backside a lot. They got beat on the down blocks, especially against Fred, unfortunately. And it was just one of those deals. Sometimes the moment's big. And Daphne played a lot this game. There's a couple. Here's the other thing that it's really tough to understand. But these athletes are human. And they have memories, right? They're not like, what's it, Ted Lasso? They're not all goldfish, right? So if your guy runs a poor route, or if your guy drops a ball, if you're Aaron Rodgers at some point in this game, and I'm not making an excuse for him, like you shouldn't do this, but if there's only one guy who's making plays for you and it's crunch time, who do you think he's going to look for? And so the responsibility starts falling on, well, not only everybody else to do their job better, so they're open in the first quarter and the second quarter, separation's obvious, but it's also the responsibility as a play caller to come over to the sideline and be like, hey, we need to get off 17 or we need to move 17 to get him in a better position. Or like, Aaron, at this point in your career, what do you want to do right now?
Yeah.
Because if you want to throw it to him, we got to move him around a little. Something's got to change. But when you get to the fourth quarter and everyone's, you see the media, everyone's on him about, especially that deep ball at the end. When Lazard comes over in the middle, it's like, there were situations in the game where he could have made some different decisions, but he was flustered way more than we thought he was going to be.
Right.
We had guys not making plays for him early in the game, and it's like he's human. There's situations that you're going to be put into that you're not going to have. You're going to have reactions that maybe you want back, but ultimately, like, we don't rise to the Greek philosopher Archilochus, right? We don't rise to the occasion. We fall to the level of our training.
Yep.
You go back to what works.
Yeah, I'm with you. Let's talk about the worst one of them all, the one that had the most consequences tied to it, the Black Punt. I saw it live, obviously. Watching the game at my house with my dad and my wife. Daughter's put to bed, so the volume level is down here. Of course, it's gut-wrenching. I haven't brought myself to watch the replay yet, so the specifics of how it actually went down. I haven't watched most anything, and something comes across Twitter, I'm like, just keep scrolling. I've really taken a little mental break because it's a long – I can't imagine what it's like for the players to put in all this time. And speaking of that, like Jack Heflin, Isaac got him, put in all this time and then get cut right before, a week before the playoff game. That's got to just suck, one. And then you obviously talk about all the players go out and play and they lose, whatever. Long season. Crushing loss. And then you just go home and you're like, well, like it's the off season tomorrow. And same with Matt.
Reload.
Off season tomorrow. Like Matt's probably started that night where he's like, let's get everything rolling and stuff. But anyways, I've just been taking a little break. I haven't been posting as much. I'm trying to stay off social media just to kind of, it takes a lot of time doing that stuff. So I'm just taking a little break. I haven't seen it again. I'm hoping you can kind of tell me what happened on the block punt.
Well, I think they rushed 6, 3 to a side, 3 on that side, and we were asking our punter to block a B gap rusher. And I mean, basically, it's not an impossible task, but it's pretty difficult. It's a big ask for as wide as that guy was rushing, and for him to be alone in that situation, given that you have the back as help, just didn't make a lot of sense.
Right.
It didn't look like it was necessarily a schematic breakdown either. Like, I think that's how they planned to do it, which was even odder. But listen, I'm not a special teams coach, and I don't know what was being said in that room. Clearly, I think everybody who's watching the game, whether you're a casual fan or an expert, we can all agree that what you were asking that long snapper to do was very difficult in that situation, and maybe it wasn't the best idea. But again, we could talk ourselves to death in why all of these things are happening on special teams. And this is what happens. Like the thing about football is it's the best reality television that there is. I mean, there's no better reality television. Like, this is so much better than the real world MTV, right? Because there's the consequences are real. It's happening right now. And what happens and it's so interesting to me is like the human side of it, the emotional side of it is you are doing poorly the entire year. You're reading the paper. How this has happened to me. Like, you're reading the paper, like your name's up there. Boy, that guy's not doing well, whatever. And there's like, how do you deal with that? Do you come in with a clear head and do you say, okay, I'm going to make sure that everything is as detailed and poignant for the situation that we're in as it can be? Are you letting this stuff accumulate? And are you bringing baggage into the way that you're game planning, the way that you're making calls? Are you able to, in that moment, make the right call, or do you have the right scheme in place? I'm just talking about with like special teams right now.
Yep.
Have you taught it in a manner because of all the baggage that's come with you over the accumulation of the last 17 weeks? Have you been able to teach this proper scheme and call it in a manner that is going to lead to success, right? And that sounds on surface level easy. It's extremely hard for everybody involved.
Yeah. No,
I mean, that's why they're there, though, right?
No, it is. Yeah. Listening to you guys yesterday, you and Herman, the starters playing, like you said yesterday, Tyreek Hill had a crazy punt return that should have ended the game, but Josh Allen's so good that he came back down and scored, and then you know how that ended. Deebo Samuel's playing on 49ers special teams. I don't know if Jair was healthy. Maybe he would have been a candidate. I know Maurice Drayton was talking about, hey, David Moore is in consideration, Randall Cobb's in consideration, Amari, and then there's like a new face. And I was wondering, and he wouldn't tell who the new face was. I was thinking maybe like EQ or Chandon, who's been back there, or like I immediately thought of Jair, but I was like, no, I doubt that because of his injury or whatever. But if he wasn't injured, maybe Jair would have been back there. Cobb, I don't know. I feel like putting guys back there. Amari clearly all year, he played okay on Saturday. Didn't have any mistakes. He kind of had a couple returns for positive yardage. So this isn't anything against him, and I'm hoping he can kind of become that player. But I don't even know who to think to even put back there. Like they have Tyreek Hill and Deebo to put back there. We have Aaron Jones, Devontae. Yeah, we have Devontae.
Listen, I think I said this on Andy's show, right? When we needed a spark, Steve Smith didn't ask to go back there. He made the statement that he was going back there, right?
Yeah, I'm going.
Yeah, when you need that, like your guy just goes, and whether that could be Aaron Jones, that could be Devontae, and listen, I don't know if those guys didn't come into the league, fulfilling those roles, which a lot of the guys you're talking about did. Like Tyreek Hill was a returner, Steve was a returner, Deebo was, so they have that experience.
Cobb was a returner. I wish he would have been like, "Hey, I'm."
Cobb also fumbled when they brought him in a couple weeks ago too. I mean, like it's terrible.
Just things like we begged for someone new back there all year long, and then you put Cobb back there and he fumbles, and we're like, "Oh man, maybe we don't really know what we're talking about."
Yeah. Well, it's not that. It's again like honestly the most interesting part about this is the negative energy that surrounds a group. Like you can get sucked into that vortex, man. It's one of those deals where, rising tide lifts all boats.
Yep.
Sinking tide, drops all boats. Like it happens. It's a real thing. You can go into a bad situation and you can be a change agent for the better, or you can just get sucked into that vortex, right? And it happens. It happens to the best players in the world sometimes. They just, man, I had an off night. It's like, well, everybody seems to be having an off night when they're on this particular team.
Yeah. No, I get it. Let's switch gears here a little bit away from the game. Hackett, he's in Denver. Getsy's got some interest being the OC with the Bears most recently.
Mm-hmm.
What's going on with Rodgers? Is he waiting to see how things shake out with the coaching staff, maybe with Devontae before he makes his decision on staying or not? After the numbness of the loss, obviously last weekend wears off, where do you think he's at mentally?
Well, the competitor in him probably wants to come back and win a championship with the Green Bay Packers. He thinks he probably had a good chance this year, as good as any he's had in the last 10 years. So from the competitive standpoint, I would think that he'd want to come back here. You look across the league and listen, you do what's smart. Like you just have to get to the dance. So like Aaron Rodgers has to be thinking, how do I get back to the dance? The teams that we're talking about, like you go to the Denver Broncos, or you go anywhere in the AFC, dude, I don't think that's a gimme that you're going to the dance. Like you just start talking about the quarterback talent they have there. I think the competitive balance in the AFC is pretty high right now, and it's pretty level at the top. You look at the way that the Bills are at it, but look at the way they played. You think about Justin Herbert in the AFC West. You think about obviously Pat Mahomes in the AFC West. The Raiders, whether they bring back Derek Carr or somebody else, have a great squad. There's just teams that there's a lot of talent in the AFC. The NFC looks like a clearer picture, And having said that, like they have one of the best teams they've had in years. I know they have some cap troubles, but they're going to be if they want to bring back guys for a couple of years, they can bring back guys. And as far as coaches are concerned, I want to say this in the most respectful way possible. Aaron Rodgers has made more head coaches or more coordinators or anything else than anybody has made him who he is, right? Yeah. So I think it's fair to say that given Matt LaFleur is going to still be the head liaison communicator leader that's dealing with Aaron Rodgers directly, I don't know how much he would care that Hackett, Getsy go somewhere else. I'm sure that he has a good relationship with him. I'm sure he appreciates how they've helped him prepare to get ready for games. But like when I showed up in 1998, Brett Favre was 3-time MVP and 2-time, Super Bowl participant, 1-time Super Bowl winner before I got there, right? These people have a history, regardless of who, Andy Reid. You start thinking about Mike Sherman, all the head coaches that came out of that tree because of, in large part, because of Brett. It's the same idea here. You have these successes, these successful franchises have coaches that move on and they just reload and they find another guy, right? Yep. So I would say if he continues to play, you would think he's going to play there.
Yeah, I agree. And you talk about the AFC, Bengals, Bills. They look like, they should have won that game. Coulda, shoulda, woulda. They were in great position to win the game. 13 seconds left, then Chiefs come down, whatnot. That happens. Bengals, Chargers. You talk about teams.
Nobody's talking about Lamar Jackson. We forgot him because he's hurt. You forgot how good Lamar Jackson is? It's like
MVP type quarterback.
Yeah. They're just insanely talented, man.
Yeah, a year ago, Browns were good. Dolphins won like 7 or 8 in a row this year. You never know. Those teams can come out of the woodwork like anything.
Can you imagine winning that many games and having a guy turn around your franchise and firing him?
My brother-in-law is a huge Dolphins fan, so I was following along with him all season long, and I was rooting for him hard. And then they fire. He loved Flores. He loved the defensive approach, and then he must have had a disagreement about. I've seen on Twitter. It doesn't matter, but I don't know. Maybe Flores was like, "Hey, I don't think Tua is the guy." Front office was like, "Yeah, he is," and they're like, "Okay."
It's crazy. Hey, I got a question for you. Is because you know a lot about football, but you haven't been in a football building in that capacity. Who do you think sets the culture for an organization? Do you think it's the general manager? Or do you think it's the head coach?
Well, right off the bat, I think head coach, because he's the one there every single day talking, doing all this, doing all that. But I'm also a part of the fan base where the trio of, you got Mark Murphy, Goot, and LaFleur. Mm-hmm. I feel like it's a little different, but when you're talking about maybe the Dolphins,
well, you have a unique structure because you don't have an owner, so that does change everything, right? Yeah. As far as for the Green Bay Packers, but everybody else in the league, 31 other teams, are the same. I'm really curious about the hiring practices, and I've been through this for 20 years, or whatever, and I just never really figured it out because right now Byron Leftwich is saying, wait a second, if I don't get to bring Adrian Wilson in, I'm not coming into your play. I'm not going to work with that guy as a Trent Baalke, right? And you start going, well, yeah, because you're the leader of the team. You're the buck stops with you. As far as every player in that building is concerned, you're the most important person in the building. You're the person we listen to. You're the person who sets the team culture. You set the schedule for everything. But the model right now is have an experienced GM, right? And let that GM pick the coach. And it's kind of always been that way. But this is the only professional sport, I think, that does that. That doesn't actually work anywhere else. It's always been curious to me because it doesn't seem like it seems like the person who sets the tone in the building would be the person that is in the most charge, but Control. They're not. I don't know.
Not even close. Yeah. And that's something as I've gotten older, I'm like, you know what? Obviously when I'm younger, I love the Packers, but as I'm getting older, I understand and now fully understand, Goot, he's the guy behind getting these players, and obviously coaches in there as well. But I always had a disconnect there. It's well, I thought the coaches, this and that, but no, it's you're giving me the players, and I'm going to do what I can with them, and that's just kind of how it works. Quick last thing for Rodgers here before we move on. If he comes back, is it for a year or is it for 2 years, 3 years?
Yeah, it would be for a couple of years, right? They'd have to give him a contract that kind of locked him in here for a couple of years until he wanted to retire. And given that Brady's 44, 45 years old or whatever, you would think it's going to be for a minimum 2 years.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, like 2, 3. Main thing is he's definitely more than capable of playing at a high level for 2, 3, 4 years already. I just was wondering because he's obviously talked about retirement, and who knows what that's all about. But a year like this and a new contract, and it's like, well,
he's actually in a better position than he was last year, right? Because he's going to get another MVP.
Yep.
And you can see the writing's on the wall of clearly how important he is to all this. I mean, the way that the season played out with the COVID thing and missing the game, and 3 receivers gone, and they still go to Arizona and win. Like you see that he is an 8-game swing, as an individual.
Yeah, everything.
Yeah, so whatever they want, like whatever Aaron wants, they're gonna have to. Okay, well, you want, I don't know, $50 million a year for 2 years? Like what is it that you want? Do you want the keys to the city? What is it that you want? They're gonna have to come up with.
Like, do they want me to come up there and hang out with them every Friday night or something?
That's right.
Like it's like it's one of these things. So
do film study with, that's right.
No, I feel like the vibe has kind of switched. Obviously, this past off season with Goot, LaFleur, all the things that were happening. Now listen to LaFleur's closer down presser talking about all 3 of us are on the same page. Like, there's no debate. We want him back. And I said, well, I guess that's kind of what happens when he plays MVP ball. And I'm rooting for Jordan Love more than anybody as well. But at the same time, it's like, well, he plays good. That puts you in a huge predicament. What do you want that to look like? He didn't play terrible, but it's one game. You can't judge, and it's 1 year. Even if you played a full year, you can't really go ahead.
Yeah, but if he was whizzing the ball around the practice field, you would know about it.
Yeah, you were telling me about that with Rodgers. You're like, hey,
yeah,
this guy's, far as
when he showed up the first day, they're like, oh, he's got that arm looks pretty live. Like that looks very familiar to number 4. You know what I mean? Like they're like you kind of knew.
You just know.
Yeah, it's like this doesn't at least sound outwardly. I'm not there, but it from the reports, it doesn't sound that way, does it?
No, I see everything just like you do, and I've yet to see anything really even close to that. And we've got a lot of practice reps this year with him. Obviously, the preseason he was hurt, so we only played one of the 3 games. I don't even remember. Anyways, next thing here, last night I saw Green Bay isn't letting Adam Stenavich interview for the Broncos OC job. Gets he's got interest from the Bears. He'd call plays there. Packers also interview Eagles quarterback coach Brian Johnson. Chargers head coach Kevin Croker was with the Packers in 2019, 2020. If you had to choose, who's the guy for the Packers OC job?
That's a great. So you don't know that. Obviously, I'm a big Stenavich fan. I like to see old linemen in that position. Well, so given the fact that they don't call plays in Green Bay, let's start with that. So you start going. My mind goes to, okay, well, what do you need to prioritize in order to be the best version of you? Because Matt has plays that he wants to run. It's just a question of what wrinkles are we going to put in. Is there something philosophically that we want to focus on this year? I would think, and this is kind of my experience in the league, having success with Mike Sherman being an O-line guy who's our head coach.
Yep.
I see the value of knowing Matt LaFleur is probably a passing game structure person. I see the value of being a complementary, Adam Stenavich being a complementary piece that works with him to create like the best practice situations. Because what happens a lot that you don't see is like an offensive line will get into their meeting room on Wednesday and the coach will line up and he'll be sweating, he's already visibly like anxious. He's up there and he'll just go something like, we're going to ask you guys to do some things this week that I know you're not going to be able to do. And then we're going to blame you at the end of the week for not doing them. And, they don't say it exactly that way, but they'll like take a deep breath and be like, and they'll put up the play and just kind of be silent for a minute or like try to like talk through it real fast. And one of the smart guys will be like, hey, there's literally no way I can make that block. What are you asking me to do here? Nah, we just got to do it. We just got to bite the bullet on this one. And at the end of the week, they'll call it like 10 times. we'll be 0 for 10. We'll be like, well, we lost the game because you guys didn't block that, And dude, that literally happens. And so having a guy who's an advocate, or at least has a really deep understanding of what can and cannot be done structurally, is really, really valuable, especially if your head coach is going to be calling the plays anyways.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I feel like with Getsy, I feel like him and LaFleur are like two of the same guys. And so, like, how valuable is it to have Getsy be the offensive coordinator when, he clearly has the ability to call plays. If the Bears want him, maybe he can help LaFleur call plays. I don't know if he needs help, but obviously with Steno, he comes up, and like you said, he's a different. There's a different sector, the most important sector. I've always tweeted like offensive line wins championships. A couple of my buddies are offensive line players, so I always have appreciated that. And so, like, to have him up there and be like, hey, like you said, talk about what can and can't be done. So, yeah, if I had to choose, I'd go Steno. And I'm sure if Getsy's serious about maybe taking the Bears job, it's clearly he gets to call plays. If I'm Getsy, I'm like, well, hell yeah, I want to go call plays. But
you're going to bring in Justin Fields. You have a defensive coach, so you're going to have a lot. I mean, from the perspective of your ambitious career, right? There's things that happen that are kind of interesting in the league to me, right? The first one, Rob, is like, take a look back at the guys who have gotten jobs off of being the quarterback coach or the OC for like Peyton, Tom, Drew Brees. You start going down the list. It's like some of those names have there's been, let's say, of huge volatility and success, right? So you could point to somebody. You could point to like Bruce Arians, right, with Big Ben. You could point to who else has just been wildly successful? Oh, Andy Reid, right? But that was 20-some years ago when he started as head coach for the Philadelphia Eagles. Like that transition with Mike Holmgren's staff. But a lot of these guys who who are the coordinator or whatever, but they're not necessarily in control, don't have the kind of success as a head coach. So you think about career aspirationally, from Luke Getsy's standpoint, if you go to a defensive place and you have a first-round pick at quarterback, that's the ideal situation for you because you're going to get the experience. You're going to largely be the head coach of the offense, which you would not get in Green Bay no matter what happened. Yeah. Right? And which Stanovich will never get in Green Bay just because LaFleur's an offensive guy.
Yeah.
And if you have any kind of success with Justin Fields, who's got an insane amount of talent, so it's like, I'm not saying you don't have to just not screw him up, but like you put some, some routines and practice habits together to create a successful offense there. You're going to get a head coaching job, right? Because now you have a named quarterback in a named franchise with a defensive coach. So that seems like a no-brainer.
Yeah, I'm with you. And you put some, decent offensive games together, you'd think that you're probably going to win, probably more than half your games if their defensive coach, head coach is doing their job. So it's like, oh, wow, like they're winning games. Getsy's taking the offensive show. The rookie's doing good. Like you said, next thing in line's head coach. So good for him. Hopefully, if I were him, I'd take that spot. Like you said, perfect scenario. Quick, before we close it down, quick rapid-fire predictions for Sunday's games. Chiefs, we were wrong.
I was 0 for 4 last week.
Chiefs, Bengals. Who you got?
I'm going to go Chiefs. I mean, listen, I can't. This is insane, right? So there's like 5 teams who gave up 50 or more sacks. Bears fired their head coach. Panthers fired everybody but their head coach. Their fans want to fire their head coach. Ravens had everybody hurt. Jets are the Jets. And the Bengals are in the AFC championship. Everyone thinks their staff is a bunch of geniuses. Dude, if you give up 9 sacks and you still win the game, I'm just like, that's everything crazy. I knew about football is wrong. You know what I mean? Like, you shouldn't be able to give up 9 sacks. Like, Joe Burrow is a generational difference maker, a game changer in the NFL. Not because for any other reason than it's almost canon law. Like, you write it down in a comic book. Like, if you give up 9 sacks, you are going to get your backside handed to you. And this guy is like, hey, just keep calling the same plays. I'll keep taking shots, getting hit in the face 13 times, getting knocked down 13 times. But the other 27 times that I get to throw it, magic. Gonna be magic.
No, I'm rooting for the Bengals, but Chiefs. I don't see any way the Bengals win that one. I'm just not a big Chiefs fan for whatever reason. How about Rams? Niners.
Rams, Niners. So I think we have to root for the Niners here, given the fact that they came in here and won. I love their style of play. I love that they went up front on both sides of the football. The Rams' offensive line has actually played better than I thought it would during the playoffs, even with not having Whitworth last week. Whitworth will be back. Obviously, I think watching Aaron Donald is like something that we should all have to pay money to do because he's the best player on the field every time he steps out.
Yeah.
He's a generational. He's the best player I've ever seen on defense, and maybe since Lawrence Taylor. And so I think that I'm going to root for the Niners. I can't imagine that the Rams don't win this game, but I'm going to be. I'm not going to tell my brother-in-law here because he's a Niners fan, but I'm going to be rooting for the Niners as well.
Okay. Dang, he's a Niners. That's tough. That's tough. Funny story. Before we close it down, I went to Hy-Vee Sunday morning, like right away, 8 a.m. Last weekend after the game. I had like a Packer sweatshirt on, a Packer hat on, and I'm walking like across the main aisle from the meat counter. So I'm not, how they always say, "Hey, how's it going? What can I get you?" Well, I wasn't even like near it. The guy's like, "Hey, how you doing?" And I was like, "I'm doing good. You?" And he goes, "A lot better than you are. I'm a Niners fan." I was like,
"Oh man."
He turned out to be a super nice guy, but I sat there. I was like, "Man, I haven't even like woken up." I mean, I woke up, but I was like, "Man."
It's a great thing about sports, though, man. It's best.
It is.
It's the fact that there's so much going on in the world, and we can sit here and enjoy these guys going out here and watching. We get to watch reality TV That's why I think it's the best thing going, man. I love it. It's a hell of a lot of fun,
and that's why I always wear it because I always love talking to people about it, like whether they're good or bad. Because I'm always, "Oh, they suck." I'm like, "Oh, who's your team?" And then I switch the tables. I'm like, "Oh, how you guys think you're doing this year?" And they're like, "Yeah, that guy was like nice. Like, why'd I come at him in a negative light?" Like, I just love talking about it. If I didn't want to talk about it, I wouldn't have worn anything. Like, just got to be proud whether they lose or win. Mike, it's great for coming on. Thank you. I'm glad we got to do this over the last 2 weeks, although I wish it was longer as far as previewing the games. We'll be chatting through the offseason in what will be a pretty entertaining one. Any last words before we close it down?
Thanks for having me on. This has been a lot of fun. Certainly I think we're all planning for this to be a couple more weeks, but so it goes. That's why it's the best reality television going right now.
Yep, I completely agree. All right, perfect. Big shout out to everybody watching, tuning in. I really appreciate it. I've included the links to Mike's social channels in the description of this video, so be sure to check those out and see all the work he's doing related to the NFL. The offseason came quicker than most of us expected, but we won't be skipping a beat as far as talking Packers, talking football. Enjoy your Saturday. Enjoy your weekend. For Mike and myself, we'll catch you guys later. Thank you.